Hey, what's going on, everybody out there? Today we are looking at a game from 2014, Zurich Rapid, between Fabiano Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura with the black pieces. So the game started off D4, knight f6, C4 from Caruana, C5 from Nakamura, entering into the Benoni, D5, G6, knight C3, bishop G7, knight f3, castles, and um, Caruana here decides to play this uh, fianchetto version of the modern Benoni. E6, bishop G2, E takes, C takes, D5, D6, and castles here for white. Now here we enter one of the main tabias for black. Um, just briefly, black usually has three plans, major plans in the modern Benoni. One is to play rook e8, um, and also uh, with this move knight a6. And uh, what that does is it definitely guarantees black queenside counterplay. However, this knight right here often becomes passively placed at c7 because the idea is to push through this pawn advance of b5. So that's one plan. Um, Another classical idea that black will use is he'll play again rook e8, but instead of bringing the knight to a6, he'll just bring this knight out to uh, d7. And what black wants to do there is secure his play on the king side, right, by securing a strong post for the knight on e5. Caveat with that is usually to maintain this knight on e5, he has to uh, commit to some weakening on the king side with this move g5 at some point in order to prevent f4 from being played to kick that knight off. So you can see there's like drawbacks to these ideas. Um, the third plan is to deal with this bishop, which sometimes ends up um, with not really an effective place to go. So one of the other plans is to basically play this move a6, and then let's say after a4 to stop this traditional advance, then the bishop just comes out to g5. I'm sorry, to g4. So this allows black to develop right easily, but it limits, the aggression. Right, he's not as aggressive in these positions. So it's kind of like take your pick. So based on your personality, you will pick, one of these systems here. So with that said, in that brief introduction to the black side of the Benoni, let's see how Nakamura continue. So he played rook e8, and Caruana played very solidly, right, conservatively. Bishop f4, just getting the pieces out. And you can see Nakamura goes for this immediate a6 with the idea of expanding with b5. So a4, Caruana puts a halt to it. And now Nakamura decides on h6 and queen c1. And already it's a interesting point in the game. Here, Nakamura plays king h7 here, just of course protecting the pawn. Um, and this gives white a slight initiative here. Another way, a more radical way, is g5. And I had already set that up earlier by mentioning that as one of black's options when it comes to trying to take control of this square. G5 here, of course, has the drawback of weakening the king side. But when you're playing systems like the Benoni, and may I even mention the Dutch defense, you're already making some structural concessions, and you might have to commit to more concessions during the game in order to get the counterplay that you need. So, for example, Here, g5, play could go bishop d2, and then swing this bishop out here to f5, h4, right, attacking the weakness, g4, right, and these moves are pretty much forced, knight e1, and h5, protecting the pawn, and let's say knight c2, knight bd7, bishop comes back, and then knight e5, and you can see the plan that I mentioned before in motion. So black has his space on the king side, right? Although, you know, again, accepting some structural weakness, but he has the necessary counterplay there. So that was a definite option there. All right. So instead of the aggressive g5, Nakamura played king h7, right, which seems rather meek in comparison. Rook e1 by Caruana, and now bishop f5, and knight h4, and now the fight for the f5 square begins. And I think Nakamura may have underestimated the idea here from Caruana. So the bishop goes back to c8, and now queen c2, and now that bishop on c8 has problems developing. So now knight h5 from Nakamura, attacking the bishop. The bishop goes to d2, and now knight d7. Okay, now here Caruana finds a fantastic move here, exploiting the awkward position of the knight on h5. So now we see the bishop on c8 is back home, and now Caruana exploits the temporary blockage of this pawn here that's not protected, and he attacks his bishop at the same time. Now the idea here is if g takes f5, then queen takes f5 check, and notice how it exploits the fact that Nakamura has moved his king to the light squares, and this knight is badly placed on the rim. So after king g8, and just picking up the knight here, and black is already in hot water. So this is why after knight f8, Nakamura is forced to play bishop f8, which preserves his bishop, of course, and protects his pawn. But again, this is not the type of play you want as black in the Benoni. Caruana calmly retreats his knight to e3, and now rook b8. So of course, with the mix-up at the beginning in the opening, Nakamura is already behind the 8 ball in achieving his goals in the Benoni. Of course, you want the queen side expansion, but you remember, you have to pretty much choose a plan and stick with it, because you don't have all the time in the world, especially with black. So if you make a mistake and you lose tempo here and there, and then you try to implement some of the same plans, it becomes problematic. So going bishop f5 and then having to bring the bishop back to c8, then bringing the bishop on g7 to f8 can prove costly. Traditional move a5, right? After b5, then the pawns will become broken. So b5, a takes b6, knight takes b6. So black gets his move in, but notice how two pawn islands are created as a result. You had the pawns on C and D, and also the pawn on the A file. Knight A4, challenging this knight, and also wanting to clear the way to play the strong traditional move, classical move, knight to C4. So knight takes, rook takes, right? And then Nakamura plays knight G7 again, longing for the day to be able to come into f5. Notice how this bishop is a problem here for black still. And I want you to think about the variation I gave earlier in the beginning in the introduction to the Benoni about how black will sometimes play a6 right away, and after a4, bishop g4. And this is why, to avoid these problems with this bishop later that Nakamura is running into. So Also, I want to point out too that, of course, white is better here, um, and it's just because of the space advantage and also just the targets in the black position. This pawn is going to be a problem to protect. This is not a strong pawn. As you can see, Caruana's bishop is well placed on d2, so it's not like this pawn can advance, and it can be easily attacked at some point by a move like rook a1, and even eventually down the line after white gets in his move e4 that he wants, and play a move like bishop f1, putting more pressure here. And also with access to c4, this pawn has to be looked after. And what that does is create passive pieces in the black position, which makes him even more vulnerable to attack later. Again, continue bishop e4 for Caruana. So Caruana is still maintaining this concept of keeping the eye on f5, right? Preventing, moves like bishop f5 again, or even the knight. So he's kind of strong pointing that that square. Even stronger idea, I show you a couple of lines. Bishop c3, right? Just immediately getting on this diagonal, and say if knight f5 at this point, right? Not a big deal because because white then can still keep control of the square. If the knight takes f5, bishop takes f5, e4, and the bishop still has to go back. All right, bishop g4 is possible, but again, the bishop is not doing anything on this square, and there's no protection for this pawn here. So rook takes a6, and this is what I was bringing up earlier about the weakness of that pawn. So after e4, the bishop is embarrassed and has to return home again, and then bishop f1, again reiterating the plan I introduced earlier. So that's one line. The other idea for white here is b4. Right, just attacking the fixed pawn chain. Play can continue. C takes, rook takes, bishop takes b4, and notice these weaknesses again, right, become clarified in the position. Again, knight f5, bishop takes, and this time queen a4, just attacking this pawn. E4, of course, e4 is also playable here. But let's say queen a4, queen c8 to protect here and keep this guy active. And then again, move like e4 or even e3, but e4 keeping with the idea is good for white. So bishop d7, and then maybe a move like queen a3. And white is better. So those are two lines. So b4 or bishop c3, which to me is a little more convincing. Both good continuations for white. Caruana played bishop e4, right? Sticking to his plan, right? He just wants to keep black's counterplay down to a minimum. So bishop e7 by Nakamura. Bishop a5, attacking the queen, queen d7, and now bishop c3, queen d8. Another idea, again, let me reiterate that it is important to seek counterplay in these positions as black. I mean, you already had the bad pawn structure, so you have to have activity and dynamism in your position to compensate when you have these structural disadvantages. So here on bishop c3 by Caruana, another idea for black to consider is bishop g5, with the idea of just taking this knight off and ruining the pawn structure. So that can lead to bishop g2, for example, to prevent that from happening. And then black can strike back with f5 himself. And bishop d3. White is still better, but black has created a little bit more counterplay in the position. Instead of bishop c3 here, instead of bishop g5, queen d8 was played. White continued on with this idea, knight c4, just putting pressure, making it hard for black to move freely with his pieces, right, to attacking locations, right, because you can't attack when you're you're constantly being attacked and have your back against the wall. Bishop d7, and now rook a3. This is the best practical choice, right? Engine would grab the pawn, and it can be grabbed, right? I'll just show you this line real quick. Rook takes a6, bishop b5, of course, right, is the fear. And also remember, this is a rapid game. Bishop a5. So tactically it works out for white, but it's easy to see why Caruana didn't go into this, right? This is a hard move to find, like rook c6, right? And the idea here is if bishop takes c6, d takes, and this pawn is very strong, okay, and that's going to be practically winning for white. Okay, just to give you a brief line there. And this is why rook c6 is powerful with the idea of coming here, of course. However, Caruana made the best practical choice, right? He keeps hold of his advantage. Again, this pawn is weak, and he figures, hey, I'll pick it up at another time. So bishop b5, Nakamura finds some activity for the bishop, right? Like a part-time job, so to speak. And knight a5. So now Nakamura has to worry about moves like knight c6 creeping up again. So this bishop is kind of stuck here. So queen d7, knight c6 by Caruana anyway. Now rook bc8, and now Caruana is gonna start attacking on the king side of the board. That's one thing about these positions in the Benoni, is it leads to a lot of rich play from both sides. Play can occur in the queen side, center, and the king side of the board. So here, Caruana has been attacking on the queen side for a while, right? And now, right, it's time to create a distraction elsewhere on the other side of the board. And you can see the alignment of the bishop and queen. The king being here, and so natural looking move h4. Bishop f8, and again black is really pretty passive here. And now bishop g2. The idea behind bishop g2 is to reroute this light square bishop to h3. So that's going to take another move, king h2, and then bishop h3, and you can see the queen and rook lined up on the diagonal. But that's the immediate tactical idea, but the strategic idea is to cause Nakamura to have to weaken himself further on the queen side, basically to push his own pawns in front of his king to denude the king. So let's see how Caruana did it. So after bishop g2, Nakamura is happy because now he can finally stick a piece on f5. Right? He has access to that square. So here he plays knight h5, king h2, and he sees the plan, of course. So this is why he played knight h5, but you'll see later. Bishop g7, bishop h3, and now he plays f5. The only other alternative, of course, is to give up the exchange. He doesn't want to do that, so he plays f5, which is pretty natural. However, this is where one of the thematic moves comes in for the Benoni. F4. I'm sorry, E4. So now with the queen and rook lined up on the diagonal, he can't capture here. So king H8, he gets off of the diagonal, but he takes F5, rook takes, bishop takes, knight goes to F6, F takes G6, and knight G4. So this is the maneuver that Nakamura had to save himself from losing the exchange right away, albeit that he's actually lost at this point. Now, after this check, Caruana played a sensible move. He just played king G1, right? But again, bishop takes G4 is possible. Queen takes with this idea of rook E3. Let's say rook F8, for example, bishop C3, bishop D4, and F4. Notice that the bishop is pinned, so he can't capture the rook because of this bishop on the diagonal. It's king G8, and now bishop takes, C takes, knight takes, bishop D7, knight E6, rook C8, and after queen D3, white is just winning. So Nakamura, after Nakamura played knight G4, Caruana just played king G1, right? Again, another practical decision. Queen E8, bishop goes to C3 again, bishop takes C6, D takes C6, and now H5. Of course, he has to secure the knight before he could think about grabbing this pawn. Now, Caruana decides to take. So bishop takes G4, H takes G4, queen F5. Of course, rook takes A6 could be played. And as you can see, black's pawns are just everywhere, just scattered and hanging. Bishop takes C3, rook takes C3, queen E1. And then Nakamura just resigned after Caruana played king H2. So nice, strong game against the Benoni in this rapid by Caruana. And I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned a little bit about the Benoni. And I just want to say thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe to my channel. Check the links below. There'll be video material related to this particular opening in the links below. And also please donate to my channel. Will be greatly appreciated. And I do want to let you know that there are about 500 videos on my channel, all different kind of subjects, end games, middle games, how to make plans in chess, compilation videos. For example, I have videos like Magnus Carlsen versus the Trompovsky, or all of Alexander Morazevich's games in the Alban counter gambit, or Grandmasters versus Latvian counter gambit, where I go over tons of Grandmaster games. The latest compilation I did was Grandmasters versus Ponziani opening. So a lot of material to learn from, and so stick around, explore the channel, enjoy, and I'll see you guys on my next video. Thanks for watching.